Hello, Springville Library patrons. It's nice to talk to you. My name is Allison Hymas. I'm an author. I write books for middle school age readers. My first book was called Under Lock and Key. It's about a boy who's a thief for hire at his middle school. So that exists and has a sequel. And now I've just released another book called The Explorer's Code, and this is it. And it's about these three kids who spend a weekend at an old house in the mountains. And while they're there, they start to realize that the house is more than it seems. There's a third floor, but no staircase and how to get there. There are codes and clues hidden in the walls, and together they're able to uncover a mystery that's been hidden in the house for decades. That's what this book is. A little bit about me. First thing to know is I'm actually from the East Coast, originally from Pennsylvania. That's where I went to school. That's where I went to middle school specifically, and that's where I grew up. I came out to Utah to go to college. I got a bachelor's degree in English and a master's degree in creative writing. And the reason that I studied English and creative writing is because I did always want to be a writer. When I was in elementary school, I didn't care for the books that they had me read in first grade. I thought they were boring. I thought that they didn't have interesting storylines, and by that what I mean is, at the time, what was an interesting story to me was something that involved monsters, science fiction elements, time travel, shrink rays, haunted houses with green slime. Loved those stories. And the books that they had me reading in first grade were about kids and their dogs, and there wasn't really any conflict. So I didn't like that. So me and my friend got together and we started working on our own little stories that had giant lizards and shrink rays and time travel and haunted houses with green slime, and it was fantastic. We worked on those, and it was quite a bit of fun. But I didn't really take it seriously. It was a hobby. It was something that was fun for me to do until I was in sixth grade. And that's when I had a teacher who told me that she thought I had the potential to become a writer, that I could potentially do this as a job. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to do it. I love doing this. I'm going to try to do this. So I started to practice. I started to work on my own first stories, which were terrible. I'm not ashamed to admit that. They're horrible. Yet you'll never see it. Any of those stories, those first stories, they're so bad. I had to delete them. They're so bad. But they were good practice for me. They taught me how to structure a novel. They taught me how to write well by letting me write poorly. And later I went to college and I studied English and literature and then writing because I wanted to do this. And all of that comes back to the sixth grade teacher who encouraged me to follow my dreams and to try to become a writer, to practice, to grow into this. So I really owe a lot to my middle school years. Those were the years that kind of got me started on this track. I probably wouldn't have thought I could actually become a writer, become an author, and publish a book if it hadn't been for that sixth grade teacher who gave me that encouragement. So middle school was an important time in my life, and middle school age books, I still love them quite a bit. Those are the books. That's the age the age range for books that I feel like was the most influential in my life growing up. So books like the Phantom Tollbooth, the Narnia books, the Harry Potter series, the Artemis Fowl books. These are the books that I grew up with, and they really impacted the way that I read, the way that I valued characters. Like, for example, the Artemis Fowl books have a lot of action, a lot of really clever plots, really clever dialogue, and a lot of sarcasm, and that's something that I used in my first two books. The characters are rather sarcastic, and they have a lot of interesting little criminal heists, and that's something that I can track back to the influence of the Artemis Fowl books on my young mind. Another thing that I really like about books, middle grade or other age ranges, is I really love mysteries. I love a puzzle. I love solving codes. I love solving crimes and mysteries. I like trying to figure out who did it in a mystery before we get to the end of the book. I try to beat the characters to it. And sometimes I succeed, and sometimes I really fail. And I love it both ways. I feel really smart when I succeed, and I really admire the author for putting together a mystery that I can't solve when I fail. So I win both ways, and it feels great. I love mysteries. I don't like mysteries where there's no possible way for me to try to solve it by the end. Even with succeed or fail, I enjoy it. But if there's no possible way to figure it out, I don't really like that. So in my own books, I try to leave, if there's a mystery or a puzzle to solve, I try to leave clues so that the readers can figure it out ahead of time. They can figure out what's going on, so that everybody's enjoying themselves. Everybody's part of the story. That's what I love so much about these kind of mysteries. Um, so with the Explorer's Code, that's what I was trying to do. I had been reading a lot of Agatha Christie novels, which are mysteries that do this, and I was also reading The Westing Game, which is a middle grade mystery, which is phenomenal. I highly recommend that book to anybody who likes mysteries or puzzles. And so that's the kind of book I wanted to write. I love codes. I love solving codes. There was a day where I got my hands on a book of codes and mysteries, and I spent the entire day on the floor with a notebook and a pen trying to solve these codes, and it was a great day. So I wanted to incorporate that in the Explorer's Code. So I'll just hold this up. So where this book came from originally was my love of codes, my love of ciphers, my love of mysteries, and my desire to write a story with kids encountering these codes, these ciphers, these mysteries, and putting it together. Beyond that, though, there are bits of the story that are very personal to me. And one of them is the fact that this is set in Virginia. Before I lived in Pennsylvania on the East Coast, I lived in Virginia, and I go to the Shenandoah Mountains with my family on vacations. So the location is very much something that I'm familiar with. It's the Shenandoah Mountains were a place that, as a kid, I found them a place of adventure, but also very welcoming, very homey. I enjoyed going there. I felt very comfortable there. But at the same time, there were these trails and wild animals, and it was exciting. So that's something that I had in mind as I was putting this together. Growing up, my mom also liked to go to old houses like the mansions in Rhode Island. There's some local ones around Pennsylvania. And so that was something I also thought of, is these old houses with their old rooms and their history, and who knows what could have happened in this place. What are their rooms that you don't get to see on tours? What happened in them? What's hidden? What's not hidden? So that made it in this book as well. Another thing that made it into this book that is personal for my life is the sibling relationships. So I am the oldest of 5 siblings. I have 4 younger brothers and sisters. And anybody who has brothers and sisters probably knows there are some interesting relationships between siblings, especially as you get older, and the relationship that you had as younger kids changes as you become teenagers. And that's something that I noticed when I was growing up, that those relationships changed. They didn't get worse or they didn't get better, they just changed. And so that's something that I explore here. So in this book, this middle character on the cover, this is Anna, and this is her brother Charlie. And in this story, they have misconceptions about each other. So Anna is very into exploring. She's not reckless, but she's passionate, and she's adventurous. And that gets into trouble sometimes, because sometimes she ends up in places where she's not supposed to go. And Charlie, the boy, he's a little more cautious, and he loves books. He likes sitting in a room and reading a book. He loves codes and ciphers. So he thinks that she is too reckless and doesn't think about the consequences of her actions, and she thinks that he's too scared of everything. So over the course of the story, they have to figure out, they have to come to a new understanding of each other. They have to figure out how to interact in a new way, and it's something that spoke to me as I was writing it, as somebody who has siblings. So I hope that that's something that if you have siblings that you will enjoy seeing in this book as well. So okay. In this book, like I said, there are a lot of codes and ciphers. They're all there for you as the reader to solve yourself. Every bit of information that you need to solve it is here. So if you enjoy codes and ciphers, this is something that you might enjoy trying out. Try to solve it. Try to beat the characters to the punch and figure it out before they do. With that, I would like to read a section. Actually, I will like to read a section. I'm going to do that in just a minute. But first, I just want to finish talking about where this book came from. I want to, as I find a place where I want to read it from, I want to talk about how important it is to use what you know, what you like in a story, but not to limit yourself there. So with writers, a lot of the time, writers will be told or will tell people to write what you know. And that's true. And you can see that I did this in this book, where it's set in a place that I know well. It involves sibling relationships, which I know well. It's something that it involves Coast Ciphers, which I love. And it's based on books that I enjoy reading. So there's a lot of elements from myself and my life that I've put into this story. However, I have never gone to an old mansion house in Virginia and solved a decades-old mystery. I have never done that. I wish I had. That sounds awesome. That's why I wrote a book about it. But I've never done that. And that's something that's so I can't say I wrote what I know because I've never done that. It's not something I know. However, I have taken pieces of things that I do know, and I have thought about, and I've looked into other people's stories. I've read lots of books. I learned how to empathize and how to imagine other situations, and that's part of what I can put into a story, into what I know. So when when a writer is told to write what they know, that means experience from their own life. That's a good place to start. It does mean their interests. That's a good place to start, but it can also mean what they've learned, what they empathize, what they can imagine. So with this book, it's part what I know and it's part what I've imagined, what I enjoy, what I've learned from other things. And as I grow as a writer, I try to really expand that area of what I've learned, what I can imagine, what I can explore, what I want to learn more about. I learned a lot about female explorers when writing this one, things I didn't know before, and that became something that I know now. So for all those out there who want to write but feel like they don't have much to write about, don't worry. You have plenty from your experience to draw on, and you can mix that with new interests, with stories that are told by other people that resonate with you in some way. Just be honest, be true, be respectful. And that's where the best books come from. They take your understanding of the world, which, by the way, is unique. Everybody is unique. Everybody's different. Everybody sees the world in a different way. And so one person's story is going to be very interesting to somebody else who doesn't have that background. But you can also expand what you know by research, by looking into interests, by imagining things, by listening to other people's stories and learning from those. So I did that with this book. I do that with all my books. And that's my encouragement to anybody who wants to be a writer, is to write what you know, but expand what you know through your imagination, through research, and through learning about the world around you. My other advice to anybody who wants to be a writer is to, one, keep at it. Writing is hard. Writing takes a long time. But if you work at it every day, eventually you will finish your project. And that's what's important, is finishing that project. And two, the first draft just has to exist. No matter what you're writing, the first draft can be garbage. Mine always are. Mine are always horrible. Because by the time I finish the first draft, my story has completely changed from where I started it, so I have to go back to the beginning and fix everything up. And that's fine, because the first draft just has to exist. Now I have a sandbox to play in. So if your first draft isn't perfect, believe me, you are in fantastic company, not just me. All writers do this. So any great writer that you know of, they had to revise their book. So that's my advice for anybody aspiring to be a writer. And now I want to read a sample from the book. So I'm going to read from chapter 6. So this is a scene where the character Anna has realized that this house has a third floor, but she hasn't been able to find a staircase. Anyway, she has found the staircase. It was hidden. I'm not going to tell you where. And now she is going up to explore this third floor. So that's the section I'm going to read to you now. So chapter 6. The dusty stairs to the third floor were silent as Anna ascended. The bookcase door closed behind her. Oh boy, I just gave it away, didn't I? Whoops. Don't worry, plenty of other secrets there in this book. Alright, back to this. The layers of dust cushioned her steps, making her feel like a ghost floating along. At the top of the stairs was a long hallway. It was dark and smelled musty, and Anna had to cover her nose and mouth to keep from coughing and sneezing. She didn't know how thin the walls or ceiling were, and she didn't want to get caught again. The carpet stretched down the hall. Mouse droppings littered the ground, and cobwebs bridged the walls to the ceiling overhead. No one had been here, not for years and years. The silent air felt heavy with the weight of what this third floor had been a long time ago, but wasn't anymore. Who had lived here? Why had it been blocked off and not walled off for good? Anna tiptoed down the hall and stopped at the first room. She laid her hand on its dusty door handle, soft and slick beneath her fingers. If she had a floor of a building that was off limits, she'd seal all the doors so no one could get in. But what if... She turned the handle. The door opened, creaking as she pushed it. Inside was a bedroom with a large brass bed frame pressed against the wall. The metal had corroded, turning green, and the mattress was gone. There was also a dresser which, when Anna checked it, was totally empty. She went to the window. Pale light shone through the dingy glass, and down below the other guests were playing croquet. Her own parents were down there, playing as a team. Her mom hit the ball into the pond. Charlie was nowhere to be seen. Anna stepped away from the window and went to the closet. It was empty except for a dress which had been left hanging on a hook inside the door. Once it had been pale blue with a deep neckline, and a skirt that looked like it would be fun to twirl in. But now the blue was barely visible beneath the dust, and in places the color had bleached and faded to a gross yellow. There were holes where moths had nibbled the fabric. She touched the dress, the cloth silky under her fingers. Who did you belong to? Anna breathed, and then coughed on the dust swirling around her, loosened from the dress by her touch. Mr. Llewellyn had given the family a history of Idlewood, but Anna hadn't had a chance to read it before the upstairs mystery took all her attention. She rubbed the cloth gently between her hands. It must have been an expensive dress. For a moment, Anna considered taking it with her as proof that she'd found this place. But that would be wrong. The dress wasn't hers. It belonged here, on the secret, dusty floor. And Anna was no thief. Anna closed the closet and left the room. She closed the door behind her and made her way to the next room. Each room was like the last, old, dusty, and empty. Here and there she found remnants of the family that used to live in the house, a few hairpins, a man's shoe. Out in the hall on a chair was a stack of books. Anna picked up the top one. Its cover had been torn off, but it still looked familiar. She set it back down and kept exploring. At the end of the hall, Anna turned left and discovered another long hall. This one had no doors on either side, but there was one down at the end. Anna's heart sped up as she ran to the door. When she pulled on the handle, it didn't move. Another locked door. Anna took out the tarnished key she'd found and set it to the lock. It didn't go in at all, so that was another dead end, literally. She sighed and looked around. The door to the third floor had been hidden, so maybe there was more than met the eye here, too. Anna took a step back and examined the door. This door looked like all the others in the house, except for the carved one downstairs. Big, wooden, flat. The other doors were set in painted plaster walls. This one was set in gray stones, like the outside of the house. That did make sense. If Anna's mental map was correct, this hallway connected to the house's tower. Maybe the tower had been separate ones, and the hallway was added later to connect the rest of the house to it through this door. But if it was the same stone as the outside, maybe it was just as easy to climb. Ideas sparking, Anna set her hand on the stone. The dust coated her hands like a gymnast's chalk. Yes, they were just as rough as the stone she climbed earlier that morning. But was there a ledge, like outside? Anna looked up and choked on dust. Her coughing and spluttering turned into laughter, echoing in the empty hall. "Oh my gosh," she said. "What kind of house is this?" A hole had been cut in the ceiling, just above the handholds Anna had found. A hole meant to accommodate a climber. Anna had a sudden vision of a rich lady in diamonds and that blue dress from the closet, clambering up to the hole, and she snorted. Okay, so maybe not her. The husband, then? Who needed this kind of entrance to the tower when there's a perfectly good door? Only one way to find out. Anna couldn't have ignored this mystery even if her parents, Charlie, and Mr. Llewellyn had begged her to. She rubbed her hands on her dusty clothes and began the climb. It wasn't any harder than the climbing stones outside. Anna lifted herself into a small room, cut off from the rest of the house, with unpainted walls. There was a small door in front of her, very small. Alice in Wonderland, she whispered, kneeling in front of it. The knob turned with a squeak, and soon Anna was crawling through the little door into the most marvelous room she'd ever seen. It was the inside of a tower. The spiral staircase wound around the stone outside, leading from the ground floor where Anna stood to several platforms above. Ropes hung from the platforms to the ground or stretched to the walls. Like the other rooms, this tower room was covered with dust, but unlike the others, this room wasn't emptied of its belongings. Items littered the ground, books, a few plates and cups, and stacks of loose papers. Anna stepped tentatively inside. The stone walls were plastered with maps and charts. The paper had yellowed with time, but the images were unmistakable. India, China, Africa. A map of the Pacific Ocean hung over an old, dusty sofa. Anna raised a hand to touch the Pacific Ocean map, but stopped. She didn't want to destroy anything. Still, who had lived here? This room seemed different than the other rooms on the third floor. Those had belonged to a proper wealthy lady and her gentleman husband. This tower is messy, lived in, forgotten. Alright, and that's all I'm going to read for you today. So thank you for watching this video. Thank you for listening to me talk about my journey as a writer and how the Explorer's Code came to be. I hope that if you read the book that you do take its challenge and try to solve the codes and clues, but if you don't, I hope you enjoy the story anyway. It's meant to be enjoyable for people who enjoy solving mysteries and for those who do not. So I enjoyed writing it. I really hope you enjoy reading it if you do. Thank you. If you want to find out more about the Explorer's Code or about me, you can find me on online. I have a website at allisonkhymas.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and yeah. Thank you, Springville Library, for having me make a video for you. I really enjoy doing this. And thank you again to all the viewers for watching this. I hope you have a great day. And this is Allison K. Hymas, signing off.